If you're a fan of the Nintendo Switch in any kind of capacity, and you've been kind of following it in the news or even just like the game releases or anything, something that always comes up whenever a new game comes out for the Nintendo Switch is when are we getting the Nintendo Switch 2, the Super Nintendo, whatever the successor to this current Nintendo console is gonna be. I feel like everyone who has a Nintendo Switch is kind of anticipating that this is the end of the Nintendo Switch lifespan and that we're kind of closing in on the successor. Well, Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa pretty much put down all these kind of speculation and rumors that were coming in on the successor of the Nintendo Switch, at least for this fiscal year. He pretty much told all his investors during their last investor meeting that not to expect the next hardware, and that even though Nintendo Switch sales are on a decline, they're going to do their best to kind of hold it together and sell as much consoles as they can. And this kind of shocked tons of people because I think, me included, a lot of us were kind of anticipating or hoping that the next Switch was going to be coming out soon. And I feel like more people are still thinking that, okay, just because we're not getting it this fiscal year, we're getting it next fiscal year. And the more I start thinking about it, the more I'm starting to think this probably isn't gonna happen. And I feel like we've been hearing this pretty much nonstop for the last couple years that Nintendo Switch is outdated, that we need next hardware. And every time new hardware is rumored, it's always something we do not expect. Whether it was the Switch Lite, the Nintendo Switch OLED. And I feel like the more I look back on it and the things that President Furukawa has said in the past, like when they hit their 5-year mark, I remember there was a lot of kind of uproar from the community because Furukawa pretty much said that we're halfway through the Nintendo Switch lifestyle. Which, if that was true, and that he said that around the 5-year mark, it means he's anticipating the Nintendo Switch to go on for 10 years, which to most people sounds absurd and sounds crazy. And a lot of people would like you to believe that Nintendo Switch is headed into uncharted waters for Nintendo, that Nintendo has never had a home console run for this long. And I feel like a lot of these people are kind of overlooking one big thing. The Nintendo Switch is not a home console. Nintendo Switch is a hybrid console. And I feel like going into the Nintendo Switch, there was a lot of naysayers and doubters who were saying that the Nintendo Switch isn't going to be a great success because of things like the Wii U. And they were always kind of neglecting that handheld market, that handheld thing that Nintendo always dominated. Whether that be the Game Boy, the DS, the 3DS, Nintendo's always been king of the handheld market, no matter who tries to challenge it. And I feel like what we're doing right now is saying that like Nintendo's headed into uncharted waters. We're neglecting the fact that the Nintendo Switch is also a handheld. And this is very common for Nintendo to run their handhelds for 9 to 10 years. The Game Boy ran for an absurd amount of time. The DS ran for a whopping 10 years. Then 3DS ran for 9 years. This is common for Nintendo handhelds. And what they do to kind of push that handheld further to like extend the longevity of the Nintendo Switch is incremental upgrades. Things like the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Micro, the DS, the DS Lite, the 3DS, the 2DS, the 3DS XL. These kind of things that don't really change the console too much, but change it enough to make people want to buy another one or just upgrade the one they have. And I feel like this is probably what we're going to see the Nintendo Switch do. I don't think we're going to get a successor anytime soon. I do believe Nintendo is looking for 10 years of the Nintendo Switch SKU. How do they do this? I do think they do release another incremental upgrade to the Nintendo Switch. And I feel like we've been seeing a lot of their games releasing currently that are future-proofing for this. Things like Tears of the Kingdom, things like Nintendo Switch Sports, things like Splatoon 3. A lot of them, all these games are using AMD upscaling techniques that kind of upgrade the graphics and the frame rates so that the games run better and perform better. The problem is the Nintendo Switch console itself wasn't really designed from the start with AMD in mind. So I feel like the next hardware we receive from the Nintendo Switch is going to have AMD in mind, and it's going to be able to utilize it on a way better level than the Nintendo Switch currently is right now. And I feel like you do that and you got another good 3 years that you can keep people engaged to the Nintendo Switch. Well, I know a lot of people are like, that doesn't make sense because even if they upgraded their hardware slightly to run the games slightly better, they have no games anymore. They used up all their big games. Tears of the Kingdom is the last big game of the Nintendo Switch lifespan. Do you really think Nintendo is going to drop one of their biggest games ever at the end of their life? Let's look at Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild has been an evergreen title since the launch of the Switch, and it's still considered one of the greatest games on the Nintendo Switch. And for the last 6 years, Breath of the Wild has been selling consistently, and now it's at 30 million units. You'd really think they're gonna endanger the opportunity to get Tears of the Kingdom up to 30 million or more units? No, they're gonna push this and make sure it has legs. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, can't they just release a Switch 2 with backwards compatibility, or even just bring out a Tears of the Kingdom version for the new Switch? Here's the thing about that. There was a lot of controversy earlier where a YouTuber by the name of Modern Vintage Gamer, who's also a game developer, was saying how difficult it would be for Nintendo to create a new console that is backwards compatible with the Nintendo Switch. And at first, I was like, okay, like, he wasn't saying that it's not impossible. He was just saying it's going to be very difficult, and he doesn't see if Nintendo is really going to invest in that. And at first, I kind of was like, okay, maybe it is hard for them to do, but they're still probably going to do it. Now I'm starting to think maybe they don't. Maybe they just extend the lifespan of this Nintendo Switch and rely really heavily on their software to push a lot of their sales. So I think a lot of people look at like profits and say, okay, Nintendo Switch isn't as profitable as the PlayStation or the Xbox. Something that people don't really take account though is profit margin. And Nintendo as a company is a lot cheaper to run than say PlayStation or Xbox. The games are like easier to develop and aren't as expensive. They're less marketed and have a lot more sticking power. Nintendo as a company has a lot less overhead than say PlayStation or Microsoft. So I don't think they're concerned about selling and making record great sales for their console anymore. They've done that. I feel like now what they want to do is just kind of extend the life of the Nintendo Switch so that they can get the Nintendo Switch successor to be even better and even stronger than it would be if it released now. And I know, okay, a lot of people are sitting here and saying, alright, well, tech stuff aside, hardware aside, it doesn't matter because the Nintendo Switch still only has the one big game, Tears of the Kingdom. Said who? Did Nintendo ever say Tears of the Kingdom is their last big game? Who's to say they don't have a Mario Odyssey 2 in the works or an extension to Bowser's Fury? Who's to say they don't go and start rebooting old franchises like Kid Icarus or Punch-Out? Hell, we haven't had a Star Fox game or a Donkey Kong game. We can also have a potential for a Mario Kart 9. Splatoon 3 is still getting consistent updates, and it probably still will. And let's not forget one of the biggest games that we've been waiting for this entire time, Metroid Prime 4. Now, Nintendo doesn't drop the biggest game every single year. We know this. They drop big games, and then they have years where they drop smaller games. That's Nintendo's strategy, and it's been their strategy this entire time. They dropped Tears of the Kingdom this year. They don't need to drop any other big games this year. They can drop smaller games like Pikmin 4. And then let's say going into next year, they release the Nintendo Switch AMD luxury version of the Nintendo Switch, whatever it is. And they drop it alongside Metroid Prime 4. And the game looks stunning. But Metroid Prime 4 still runs on your old school Nintendo Switch. You don't have to get the new one. But if you want the best version of Metroid Prime 4, you buy the new Nintendo Switch. And then after that, they release games like Mario Kart 9 or the next Mario Odyssey, a Donkey Kong game, a Star Fox game. They still have IPs. People forget Nintendo is a game developer with decades of IPs behind them. They could pull from any one of those. We've seen them do it with like Famicom Detective Club. We've seen them pull deep and bring some weird obscure games. No, not all those little games are going to sell like your Tears of the Kingdoms, are going to sell like your Mario Odysseys. But not every game on a Nintendo Switch sells that much. We look at games like Metroid Dread that sold 3 million. Games like Kirby's Forgotten Land which sold 3 million. And those are considered successes. Because again, not every game needs to sell 30 million to be successful on a Nintendo Switch. They're not putting $2 million in development like PlayStation, like Xbox. They have a different strategy when it comes to developing games. And their games have a lot longer legs. If you look at all their games that sold the best, a lot of those are from year 1 or year 2. Things like Breath of the Wild, things like Mario Odyssey. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a Wii U game. So yeah, Nintendo has been doing this strategy for a long time, creating games that have long legs, and this is what's keeping the Nintendo Switch afloat for so long. Nintendo has the capability to make games that are fun, even despite their graphical problems, even despite their frame rate issues. Nintendo doesn't really care about that so much. And let's not act like if Nintendo came out with a slightly better version of these games and then also dropped things like a next Mario Odyssey, a Mario Kart, a Donkey Kong, or a Star Fox game, they're not gonna add even more longevity to this console. Not to mention the fact that most households that have a Nintendo Switch are more likely to have multiple different Nintendo Switches in their household, like the Switch Lite, like the Switch OLED. It's not a PlayStation 5 where most people only have one. And when the PS5 Pro comes out, most people are going to take their PS5, sell it, and then invest that money to get the next PS5 Pro. This isn't PlayStation. This isn't Xbox. Nintendo is a different kind of animal. And because their console sells multiple units to the same household, because their games have long legs, and because they don't need to make the best looking or best running games, they're in a weird and unique position where they don't have to upgrade their console in sizable amounts. And let's face it, how many people are asking for a Nintendo Switch 4K? I feel like at this point, everyone would just be happy if the games run 1080 60 frames. And if they can get a Switch and have it better utilize AMD, where they can get a lot of their Nintendo Switch games running better, not to mention being able to develop some more stronger games that aren't the most impressive games. They don't have to be the God of Wars, but they're impressive enough. People will be happy because they know that Nintendo makes fun games. So no, I don't believe we're getting a Nintendo Switch successor. All of this is speculation, by the way. I could be 100% wrong, and I probably will be wrong. These are just my thoughts. Let me know down below what are your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please do me a favor and like the video. Consider subscribing, as it does help me out tons. With that, I'm going to end this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.